This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
It is 6:01, 6:02. I'll now call to order the February 24th meeting of the Easthampton Conservation Commission. This meeting is being recorded. This meeting of the Easthampton Conservation Commission will be conducted in person and simultaneously via remote participation online to the greatest extent possible. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so despite best efforts, we will post on the City of Easthampton website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Should an interruption occur in which the online meeting ends abruptly, both the in-person and online meetings will not be restarted, and all agenda items will be automatically continued to the next scheduled meeting. Are there any public concerns, non-agenda items? We have no public in the room. And I'm not sure that we have any online either.
We have one. There we go.
Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to public hearings. Listed on the agenda, the first two items, A and B, are public hearings that were already continued to the April 7th meeting. We're keeping them on the agenda as a reminder, so we will not be discussing those this evening. Item C is a public hearing for notice of intent filed by Goddard Consulting LLC on behalf of Williston Northampton School for pond restoration and herbicide treatments, map 144, lot 10. This is Mass DEP file number 1510331. I believe we have somebody here from the project team. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to present or if we should jump right into our discussion.
Yeah, hi, that's me. Good to be speaking. I don't have anything additional to
Would you
present.
please introduce yourself for the record?
Yeah, my name is Owen Kramer, Goddard Consulting. I'm one of the people who helped prepare the filing. I know Steve came and gave a presentation, I believe, at the last meeting. So the plan is the same. I don't think anything's changed. I know there's been some communication just about stuff like the pond management plan, which I don't think is contingent for necessarily the passing of the NOI. So I don't have a lot to add. Same plan, treatment and management of the pond, hopefully a 5-year OC. And I don't have any additional update, but yeah, I'll be here if there's any questions, and I'll be taking notes on anything that you guys have as far as wants, wishes for any conditions, that kind of thing as well.
Great, thank you. And one thing that did come up, I was reviewing the forms as the meeting was about to start. The pond is listed as 12.5 acres, 544,500 square feet of land underwater impacts. But we're all a bit skeptical of that number. That seems large, and doing just a real quick trace of the site on Mass Mapper, we came up with under 4 acres. So curious if you have anything you can double check that against to make sure that we're dealing with the right impact numbers.
I didn't personally do any sort of area assessment myself, so it's hard for me to speak to it. I think, if you could pull it up on Mass Mapper, I would say the word of caution there is, of course, that Mass Mapper is not always perfectly accurate. I believe any area calculated on probably would have been on ArcGIS Pro, which also isn't perfectly accurate, and of course is also subject to human error. So I apologize if it's inaccurate. We're talking a decent size with a relatively small pond either way, something along those lines. So hopefully it's not a huge difference, and I think everything is always going to be dosed appropriately to the size. So, any licensed applicator is going to have to make sure they know the exact size before that happens, but hopefully it won't have too much of an impact on the permitting itself.
Right, I don't want to issue a permit that says you're going to have 3 or 4 times the amount of impacts that you're really anticipating having, because we're seeing that large of a potential discrepancy. So I think we need to double check those numbers before the paperwork would get finalized.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, I apologize if there's any sort of discrepancy there. Again, I wasn't responsible for drawing that number, but yeah, I mean, there's a few different ways to check it, of course.
Ava, do you want to give us an update from your side?
Yeah, so after our conversations last week as the commission, I started drafting a draft set of conditions. And I thought we could go through those, particularly given that this is not a standard construction project set of conditions. I also drafted like the project summary, but maybe we want to start with the conditions, or do you have an order preference?
I think the conditions sounds like a good place to start.
And I guess we'll get to them, but Commissioner Busa and I spoke about the pond management plan that the commission discussed last time, as well as possibly requiring the filter strip. So we'll get to those, but just to flag those. Okay, so this first set are the same, like standard. Coming down to here, there's a DEP issued like an aquatic management writing orders for aquatic management back in 2004. So I took some of the language from that, how they suggest a condition around refueling. That's what condition 11 is based off of. Same with 12, out fish kill, in the event of a fish kill. And this draft attachment requires the applicant to nominate an environmental monitorer similar to the role of like a stormwater monitorer from the team, to be like the person in charge of making sure everything's going according to plan on their team. And then 13 through 15 are standard. 16 requires that the person has to have the required license, and that they are currently, that the herbicides used, herbicides and algicides, are currently approved by the Pesticide Bureau. And then 17 draft some language for this pond management plan. So maybe I'll read that aloud. This section's highlighted because I wasn't sure exactly what we were looking for in here, but maybe I'll read this aloud and then we'll take it from there. So the applicant shall submit for approval a comprehensive pond management plan that evaluates the anthropogenic impacts throughout the Williston campus and broader watershed, influencing water quality, and recommends future management practices. No extension beyond the expiration date of this order shall be granted prior to the approval of the pond management plan. The pond management plan shall include water quality data for a suite of parameters, including pH, temperature throughout the water column, alkalinity, thank you, total K nitrogen, ammonia nitrogen, nitrate nitrogen, total phosphorus, dissolved phosphorus, sediment depth, specific conductivity, E. coli, algae identification and enumeration, and water quality. Pond management plan shall identify the history of watershed management and land use on Williston campus. Pond management plan shall identify root causes of water quality degradation. Pond management plan shall identify key recommendations for the Williston Northampton School for land use in line with best watershed practices. The pond management plan shall include recommendations for education in collaboration with other organizations and individuals within the watershed, and the pond management plan shall provide measurable goals for water quality for Williston Pond.
Comments or questions?
The first, the last line in the first paragraph, it says no extension beyond the expiration date shall be granted prior to the approval of the pond management plan. I know last time we met, we talked about how they might need an extension because it might take them 3 years to just raise enough money to actually then create a pond management plan. And then they would need an extension unless we approve it for longer than 3 years. So I was curious if that changed in your writing of it, or am I just misunderstanding how it's written?
No, I think that was right. I think the extension piece, I included this line based on conversations that Commissioner Busa and I had, but I think it's a great thing for the commission to think about both how long we want this order to be for, 3 or 5 years, and whether or not an extension, which would, so the idea with the pond management plan is that they should have a pond management plan submitted before they request a certificate of compliance. So whether or not that should be able to be a moving deadline, or if the commission wants a firmer deadline.
That last thing you said sounded right, like they can't get the certificate of compliance until they have the plan.
Right.
But it seemed like they might need an extension beyond the 3 years. So unless you're gonna do 5 years. I mean, that based on what Steve said last time. I don't know if maybe that's changed.
Because my question would be, at what point would we stop issuing extensions, which would just carry on the sort of Band-Aid treatment rather than ask for a greater look at how to restore the pond more fully?
I think that's a really good question. Yeah.
Has there ever been a pond management plan for Williston?
Not that we've been made aware of.
How long are we making this? How long is this supposed to be for?
Typical would be 3 years. They've asked for 5. So again, I think it comes down to, are we comfortable with 5 years of treatment before we would be requiring a more detailed look at this issue? And I think that, just to back up a step, I think all of that kind of hinges on the fact that this is being expressed and permitted as an ecological restoration project.
Yes.
And so the thinking about the ecological goals, we wanted to make sure that there was something that was getting more at the root causes of the problem so that we're actually restoring the pond and having long-term benefit rather than just continuing to treat on a yearly basis without getting at why it needs treatment.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
So a question, and not intending to advocate for the answer, but given that this is intended as an ecological restoration project, should we be asking for information on flow-through rates of water through the pond and turnover times? Yeah, I think the chemical parameters are informative, but should we be asking, what the natural flushing of the pond is?
I think, Hal, that we've just hit upon something that's in your sweet spot, and I would love to hear from you what you think, if we should be asking for it.
Well, I mean, personally, I would prefer that, but I'm also, recognizing that I'm, a little bit out of my depth.
Sounds like you're in your depth.
It does.
We're out of our depth.
It sounds like it's right in your depth here.
I would like to ask for some information on,
Flow through.
flow through rates, flushing of the pond,
Okay,
some measure which would give us some insight into that.
excellent. Yeah, this is a really open section. I'm not sure, anything that we want to ask for in this suite of parameters. We don't have a close model to go off of. The last time this was done for Nashawanda was in the 90s. So, we can look at the list that they used then, but that was a while ago as well.
And I think the chemical constituents were all put here partly at DEP's suggestion, right? Yeah. So we're not necessarily married to those either if there's some that feel inappropriate. I think the nutrients certainly, the nitrogen, phosphorus make a lot of sense. I'm not aware of there being any bacteria issues in this pond, so I don't know if that's critical. But, at some point, if you're doing 5 of the suite that's listed here, it's not a substantial additional cost to just do them all and find out what's going on.
I also, I mean, think they're doing this already anyway, but I don't know if you want to put dissolved oxygen.
Sure. Could we return to so like we're looking for information about flow through rate. Is that the phrasing of it, or?
That's the best that I can come up with, right now.
Yeah.
And not to disagree, but just a comment on the dissolved oxygen. That can range widely on a daily basis, depending on where and when you take it. So
Yeah.
that would
Right.
that would be a difficult one to know exactly what you're asking for.
Totally. And we haven't gotten to the pre-treatment conditions yet, but that enumerates how when they're supposed to measure dissolved oxygen and at what time in this treatment cycle.
So can we return for a moment to the timing of this? Do folks have further thoughts on 3 years, 5 years, whether you like the idea of making an extension contingent on completion of the plan, or if we're comfortable extending before that was done?
I think that the conversation last time, or the last meeting, we did say that 3 years we like the idea of 3 years and then being able to grant an extension if that was necessary. Given that they've never had a plan, I'd like to see them get a plan in place and, work with them if they do need an extension.
The commission can always deny an extension.
That's true, but if we anticipate that we would deny if this wasn't ready, I'd want to make that clear up front so that they know they need to be working towards it.
Right.
Wasn't the reason they wanted the 5 year was more monetary? They needed to have more money to do all of this to put into the plan.
I think the 5 year was asked for originally just to simplify how often they'd need to come back because they knew this was going to be an annual treatment. And we're adding an element that says, hey, let's not have this be an annual thing forever. Let's figure out what's really going on here. So I don't think the 5 year request was tied to this, at least not initially.
But Steve did say it would probably take them 3 years to raise the money to do the plan. Why that is, I'm not exactly sure, but
Yeah, we shouldn't be talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars here. We might be talking about tens of thousands.
Was that also based on the correct size? Do we have to wait?
I don't think that the cost of doing a management plan would hinge on whether this is a 4 acre or a 12 acre pond.
And I think Steve is currently working on a plan, a proposal for Williston for this plan management plan, depending on what the commission is looking for included.
I mean, I suppose we could really hedge and change the wording to something like the commission reserves the right not to grant an extension prior to approval of the pond management plan, which we know we have anyways, but at least that puts it in writing that this should be on their radar. Kind of a throwaway sentence, but
or that the extension would be contingent upon some evidence of them at least working on a pond management if they haven't finished it yet. Something like that.
To show like good faith effort.
I think that's what.
Okay.
yeah.
Show that they did the fundraising. They have the money or
Our bake sale,
Did this company do the pond before? Is this the same company?
They did what to the pond?
to do, the pesticides.
The former treatments?
Yes,
I don't know.
It wasn't Goddard, but I think Steve has been with this project since
yeah.
2007, like since they started doing treatments, but Steve has worked at several different companies.
I mean, do you feel 5 years is too long? For an initial time management thing, so we haven't felt.
My, if they had the funding, you certainly don't need 3 years to do the plan. It's maybe a 1 or 2 season thing. And I don't know how Williston's funding or capital planning works, but they certainly do lots of other significant projects that would cost far more than this. So I don't think it should be something that would take them, 10 years to raise funds for, but obviously I don't know.
I'll change this line to something along the lines of, the commission reserves the right to not grant an extension if a good faith effort towards the creation of this pond is.
That sounds pretty good.
And then I think, if it's not explicitly stated, it should be somewhere that the certificate of compliance won't be issued without it.
Yeah, okay. It's in the, I think it's in the section of like what they need to request a certificate.
Is submitting this as an ecological restoration, get them anything useful in terms of funding or? Like, is there any benefit to putting this as an ecological restoration versus just an approval for pesticide treatment of the algae in the pond?
Ecological restoration projects have some different, regulatory elements tied to them, but in this case, I don't think it really gets them anything particularly beneficial. For some projects, it's a way of freeing up some of the performance standards, for instance, so you can have more impacts on larger areas because it's recognized that it's for restoration benefit as opposed to like putting a building on top of it and paving it. But that doesn't really apply here.
Anything else that the commission's looking for in this? So including a flow through rate.
I like the incorporation of the education and collaboration with other organizations. Make it more restoration.
Which I will note that there's some real possibility. I mean, we have a very active Neshowannock Pond Committee, and this flows so close. This flows right into it. So it does seem like there's some real.
And they presumably have all sorts of science educators there and curricular tie-ins and various things. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, it could be a great educational opportunity. So history, root causes, recommendations, education, collaboration, and then some measurable goals. I was wondering if the commission agreed with that piece of it. I'm thinking like some kind of reduction in sediment or reduction in certain nutrient levels. But I'm not an expert in aquatic science.
think that's a reasonable wording, just because at this point, we don't really know what we're asking them to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Me too.
I mean, I guess we could, the stormwater lingo would be to call them structural and non-structural controls to go along with the goals. So what are the actual things you're gonna implement, whether they're physical practices or education things? So we could ask for both the goals and the structural and non-structural measures to be put in place to meet the goals.
Excellent. This was in the note on the side here. I was just doing some research about what might people check when they're monitoring lakes and ponds. And this is what the state uses when they're doing like their, 10-year or 20-year survey of all of the different lakes. But I imagined this was maybe a little more robust than we needed. Also, these are often bigger bodies of water.
Read that from here.
Oh, should I? Yeah, sorry, apologies. Mm. Mm-hmm. Oh, it doesn't make it bigger,
Yeah,
does it?
there, it doesn't.
I had a seasonal stint with Connecticut DEP for a period of time where I participated in this, some bigger bodies of water.
Dissolved silica. That wasn't on your list, right? Carbon.
But things like the phytoplankton community, the diatom community, like those you have to send away. You send away to
So you thought that would be too much?
That's fine. I thought this was maybe this was the far end of it, but I didn't know if there was anything that the commission.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more interested personally in tying the land management to some of the most likely nutrient drivers for the problems that they're seeing.
Yeah.
Can't honestly say that I can tell you what all of those elements that they're using at the state level of water chemistry would even tell us, but I don't think that they're necessary to get at that sort of core question.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Anything further?
So then condition 18, this was something Commissioner Busa and I spoke about as like another kind of restoration technique that maybe could be part of this order, which would be requiring a planting plan for a vegetative community. We spoke about 10 feet, but that's a flexible number. Acknowledging that the way this would work, and I have it as one of the pre-treatment conditions, is that they would submit a native planting plan prior to first treatment, and then the commission would approve that, knowing that. And my hope with this condition was to give Williston some flexibility, knowing that they're going to probably not completely vegetate the entire perimeter of the pond, that they have some desires for there to be certain spots where you can access it or where you can see it openly or something like that. But
Would they have to cut down trees to?
to
That
do
are
this right
there
now, there's only a few trees on the perimeter of the pond. It's really mostly grass. It's kind of it's a hard time of year. We can't really get a great sense of, but it's mostly just grass on one side, slope on the other. It butts the road on the back, like past the bridge.
The idea of a filter strip is to get more vegetation between managed lawn and the water. So certainly we would not want them to cut down any trees. That would be counterproductive.
Okay. So that then there's less runoff from the lawns, is that part of the idea?
Yeah, slow runoff and absorb some of the nutrients or sediment that might be contributing to the pond. It's sort of in lieu of having a management plan and a larger systemic approach to addressing the underlying causes. This is sort of an interim step that goes beyond just treatment to acknowledge that there is probably some landscape management change needed, but sort of buys the time to figure out what that is.
So how does this work with a limited project if they put plants in and they don't survive?
Yeah, that would be a question. I didn't include any, I don't have anything in here yet about monitoring percent survival over a period of time. That's a question.
Yeah, because I don't know, because it's limited, because it's a filter strip, are we looking to, if something happens, to have them plant? Like, is this a requirement from us to ask for plantings if those don't survive?
I think we would have to decide that, but they may not even, I mean, their plan may be to have a different kind of seed that they throw down there and it doesn't get mowed as often, right? Like this doesn't necessarily need to be trees and shrubs. We're asking them to come up with something, understanding that obviously they manage their landscape very heavily. So not wanting to prescribe something, wanting to find something that works for them and their aesthetic, but also creates this bit of a buffer. And I would venture to guess that Williston would not be of the mind to leave a bunch of dead plants next to their pond if that was what happened. So I don't think that would be a major issue we'd have to address. They do a pretty good job of keeping things neat and tidy over there. Now, do folks like this idea? Does it seem appropriate?
I think it is.
I don't think.
Does 10 feet seem like and knowing that that's going to be somewhat variable in different places too.
I think this is a learn by doing situation.
Yeah, I've never seen a firm recommendation here. I think anything is better than mowing right to the edge, obviously. Exactly how wide that is could be debated. It's going to depend on slope and what the plants are. But I think the idea is to start to change the practice. So I'm comfortable with 10 if others are.
Seems like a good starting point.
Great. Okay. Okay, so then we get into the pre-treatment conditions. This first one just lays out that the applicant will have an environmental monitor and that they're responsible for paying close attention, basically, and seeing if there's any unintended impacts of the herbicide, and that they are to submit the written report within 10 business days after a treatment. Condition 20 just lays out the sign. '21 references the native planting plan. 22 says that you have to post the type of herbicide next to the sign. And that will be, as Steve outlined, that's variable year to year too, depending on what they see. And then 23 requires there to be a contingency plan submitted, which is, yeah, there again, I think it's their plan if things go wrong. This seems to be like this was in the Nashawanic herbicide order. And now we get into Commission 24 gets into the DO and vegetation monitoring. So Commissioner Booth and I were trying to remember why it's you're supposed to have 2 DO measurements, one that's between 7 and 3 days, and then one that's right before. But that's the phrasing that's in the Nashawanic plan.
Between 7 and 3 days before.
Prior to the plan day for treatment. So you're supposed to have a measurement like in that.
Okay, and prior to treatment.
And then prior as well.
So we just mimicked the requirements for the Nash Pond.
Should be like immediately. And then again, 3 days, not like within 3 days following.
So there's one between 7 and 3 days before, one immediately prior, and 1 3 after.
Yep.
Not, or less than 3 after. Yep.
Less than 3 after. And then presumably all of those will be, all of them will be in the report. And the 2, well, I guess we could think about how we want to phrase this. So this describes where Steve showed us a map. I can pull that map up. It's in the NOI of the 2 locations to measure. And this language mimics the Nash Pond language. And then, yeah, go ahead.
So the DO read, it says the reading shall be submitted to commission at least 2 business days prior to scheduled treatments, but then aren't we asking for the readings to happen right immediately before the treatment?
Right.
How do they do both those things at the same time?
It's a great question. So I imagine this DO reading would just be the 7 to 4 day or the 7 to 3 day one.
Okay.
But I could clarify that. I mean, I guess because DO varies a lot, right? That's why we want that. That's why we want it monitored again immediately before.
Yep.
Just
Yeah.
like so.
And potentially it can vary a lot between morning and late afternoon of a given day.
Right. Does the commission have any thoughts about this section? Does this section being complete?
I think so.
Okay. Okay, so then 25 is standard. 26. So this is the initial pre-treatment meeting, and I guess that should be clarified unless the commission wants to have this meeting before every treatment? This is like instead of the pre-construction meeting.
Yeah, I would think just the one is
Okay.
sufficient unless anyone feels differently.
I agree.
We don't have a meeting before every treatment for Nash Pond.
Um, this is the- Okay, 27 says at least 7 days prior to any activity or treatment, the locations of access for treatment activities are to be identified on a map. I'm not sure this might be kind of a Frankenstein condition. Like it came in from a different, pulling from different sources. Does that, so
It makes sense.
just where they're gonna get in, right? It's not-
That feels far more relevant to Nash Pond, which is large and has very, very banks and shoreline than it does this pond, which is all pretty much in a lawn.
Yeah.
I'm personally not too concerned with where they decide to enter the pond.
I think so, because I think they're gonna be using small boats that 2 or 3 people can carry over the
Yeah.
lawn.
Could just lift over.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that one out. And this also should probably just be the prior to the first treatment. Though I guess if it changes, maybe
Yeah,
we
they
want.
change contractors. I think we need a construction observer or supervisor.
Yeah, maybe this list. We can just take that list out.
Yeah, we do receive a pre-treatment notification for Nash Pond every time.
Yep. And that has all the people in it as well.
I believe so.
So then 27 and 28 sort of combine and go together. And Commissioner Musa and I spoke about that as well, as if it's relevant to have all these people notified. And we said that we decided that maybe it was, just so that everyone was in the loop in case people have questions.
Particularly because it flows directly into River Thread, which is a city pond and it's visible from the bike path. So just to make everybody aware, it seemed like a good idea to keep this notification clause in, even though it's not treatment of a city pond per se, that they may get questions.
Yeah, no harm in that.
And then 29 is just the list of things that should be submitted prior to any treatment. So photographs of the site, what vegetation density they're seeing, the names of the herbicides and algicides, the concentrations, timing, duration, just their whole plan, the necessary license, and then here's the,
So this is a per treatment submission.
yep.
I think that's not clear.
So something like prior to each treatment.
Yep.
I wonder if do you think it would be helpful for me to restructure this section a little bit and be like, these are the things that we need prior to the initial treatment, and these are the things that we are expecting prior to each treatment? Because I do think this order, as it said, as it jumps around a little bit.
I always like bullet points.
Yeah, but your organization makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would make it,
Yeah.
I think that would clarify things for everybody across the board.
Do that. Okay. And then the during treatment section is pretty standard.
Construction plan,
Thank you.
31.
Awesome. I did notice that in the Nash Pond one, it had someone's cell phone number in here. Maybe the previous chair.
I'm sure because we didn't have an agent.
Right. Okay. But I guess it was there was like a business hours in the line, and then there was an after hours line. Should I include something like that in here?
So that's a daytime number.
This is a daytime number. Yeah, this is my office number.
That's a larger conversation we should have offline because there should be somebody who can be notified in the case of any kind of environmental mishap at our
Yep.
project sites 24/7.
Yep.
So let's discuss that later and then we can figure out what to do here.
That sounds great. Okay, and then the post-treatment, this is just the standard ones. No, is this relevant here? As built feels like a funny phrase for.
Yep, there's definitely not an as-built.
But do we want to plan showing the variable?
We're getting the report after each treatment, right?
Yep.
I don't think that this makes sense. There really isn't a final plan that goes with this.
Okay.
The plan that we are looking for is the management
It's the
plan.
management plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is further down here. So-
And I think letter from a qualified environmental professional certifying compliance of the property with this order of conditions. Yeah, actually that I think that seems fine. It's just somebody saying that everything's been completed in accordance with the order.
Apologies for the formatting.
Imagine that, document that doesn't cooperate when you try to change the indentation. I've
Yeah.
never had that problem before.
Okay, so then post-construction photographs, that seems fine, even though we'll get those after every report.
Treatment.
Post-treatment, thank you, yeah. And then summary of any corrective actions,
Mhm.
and then here's a finalized and approved pond management plan.
Yep.
Great. And then here's this in perpetuity section. So this would be, I guess, if we wanted, I mean, did the commission settle that we don't want to include anything about ongoing, like an ongoing O&M plan for any kind of filter strip?
I think my hope would be that whatever the ongoing might be, is going to come out in the pond management plan. That would be my intent. Because it may be that the filter strip isn't the appropriate long-term action once that's been
Right.
conducted and there's other things being proposed. So rather than further define that, I'd rather see what the plan reveals personally. Are others comfortable with that?
Great.
Good.
Okay, then I couldn't think of anything else that would make sense for an in perpetuity condition here, just knowing that it's.
No, that seems good. Great. Anything anyone feels like we've missed?
So it's if they change pet herbicides or if they change the licensed professional,
They have to
we're
provide that
gonna
with
get
each
all
treatment.
that. Okay.
Yep. Oh, and any questions from your side, from the applicant?
I think I don't have any questions. I think this is quite thorough. The only thing I would maybe add would be to say in the section where it specifies 10 feet, like you guys were saying, you know, that may not be applicable for every specific area around the pond. So maybe something like 10 foot wide or with commission approval, a suitable distance for protecting the pond. Something along those lines, because if it has to be exactly 10 foot wide for the OOC, that's, I think, probably stricter than is going to be reality on some level.
Mhm. So Ava, maybe we could reword it to say the commission requires a native planting plan to be approved prior to the first treatment. With the intent of establishing an approximately 10-foot wide filter strip around the perimeter of the bank. Leave it more about the plan approval and its general intent than a strict 10-foot. I think that accomplishes our intent and addresses the concern.
Yeah, I think that sounds very well written.
All right. All right, so I
Awesome.
think you've got everything you need to go ahead and polish that up.
That's good. And then should we take a look at attachment A, project summary?
Sure.
Okay. Enough. This is good. So we need to figure out if this is actually the size of the pond.
Yep.
Would it be appropriate to quote any part of the regs here, either the definition of ecological restoration or this section, which outlines, which like mentions aquatic nuisance vegetation management as a ecological limited project as a possible other type of other.
It would certainly be appropriate. I don't know if I wouldn't say it's strictly necessary, so it becomes somewhat a matter of style for you as you're beginning to write the orders.
Okay.
If you find it helpful to reference that so that it's documented for the future, by all means, have at it.
Okay.
The only other thing I might do is potentially change the phrasing around where it says the approved work includes the production and approval of pond management plan to specify that the order requires that. Because it's not really part of the approved work as it was submitted in the NOI.
Yep.
And they're not necessarily strictly obligated to complete everything that was initially proposed and permitted, whereas they are required to complete a condition.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, we should definitely clarify the square footage and the acreage.
Yep. I was also wondering,
Not cooperating.
no, it's not. I'm just trying to do too many things. I was wondering, so their NOI does not include impact to bank because the claim in the NOI is just that the herbicide won't impact the bank. If we're requiring vegetative strip, then we should.
I would argue, I think accurately, that because it's something we're having them do as a condition and not part of the work that was proposed, that it wouldn't go into their impact calculation.
Makes sense.
Just the pesticide dissolved in the water, not in the bank.
Like if it washes up on the bank. It
Well,
impacts.
Yeah, it can't help touch the bank. Where's that overthinking?
Think that, fertilizer and pesticides applied to the lawn and washing down the strip would be much more of an influence.
That makes sense.
Yeah. DEP didn't express any question about which resource areas were included, so I think we're good with land underwater.
So here I'll change that to, yeah.
And I guess that last sentence also about the filter strip. And it might, I mean, this is, what do you have under findings actually before I? Yeah, so I was gonna say, I think the summary that we write and attach can also be like, it might be appropriate there to just note that we're requiring those things because this is meant to be ecological restoration and we're wanting to establish more of a long-term plan. So that could be memorialized here as well if that feels appropriate.
Yep.
Or I've sometimes seen that put in under findings, either way.
Okay.
You would have to add again, add in where the 10-foot filter strip is approximately.
Yeah, I can just planting of a vegetative filter strip.
That works. I think you're in good shape.
Okay. And the commission did settle, we're sticking with 3 years.
Is everyone comfortable with that?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they'll come back and tell us. They really just think it's simple to me. Not being them. No.
Well, we've already amended the language so that we're not
Yeah.
forcing them to do anything in 3 years.
Right.
I think we're good.
Okay. So what comes next? Do I edit this and then present it back to you at the next meeting?
So typically once we've discussed conditions and you're comfortable, you have all the information, we don't necessarily need to see them again.
Yeah.
So we could go ahead if everyone is ready and vote at this point to issue the order. And then, you would just behind the scenes clean things up, get everything, typed up, formalized, ready to go, and attach those conditions as they've been discussed and voted upon.
Great.
So with that, I'll ask if anyone is ready to make a motion to issue an order of conditions.
You want to do it? Rob?
Go ahead.
Okay, I move that we approve the order of conditions with subsequent minor edits to be prepared for the project applicant.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right.
Excellent.
And can you let us know what the acreage is?
Yes. Yeah. So
I'm curious now.
yeah. So Owen, I'll work on making those edits. And if you can get me that acreage calculation in the next short time, so I can have it as accurate.
Sure, yeah, in a preliminary sense, I was looking at it during this meeting just a little bit really quick in my, fastest capacity, and I think something like 7.5 acres is what Mass Mapper would give you. ArcGIS has like a completely different number, which I don't trust at all. But yeah, I would love to get out there myself and actually take a look on some level, since I think it's quite unreliable to use mapping software, which may be, just tracing an out of date ortho, something like that. It can be hard to say. But I'll endeavor to get you an updated number in no time with the best possible practices and some explanation of methodology as well.
Great. Excellent. And that will just be a Wilson pond, not including rubber thread too.
Okay.
Seems good. All right. Great. Moving on.
Thank you, Owen.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
The next item listed here under request for certificate of compliance has already been continued to the March 10th meeting. So we'll move on. Are there any updates on enforcement actions?
No updates on enforcement actions.
Okay. Any updates under open space?
Yes. Okay. I do have a Borkowski parcel update. It's too bad Commissioner Buttrick isn't here, but we can update him when he comes at some point in the future. So the update I have around Borkowski parcel is around the let me just pull it up. Okay, it is around the Rocky parcel. So this was something Commissioner Buttrick flagged when we were talking about ownership of the parcels around Borkowski parcel. And I did have an opportunity to walk the parcel with the mountain bikers. Did we review that? Yeah, we did. Okay, and the loop that we took, and that so a section of the trail as it currently stands goes on to the Rocky parcel. The trail also goes on to private property, which I think there's many kettles of fish for the commission on this particular parcel. So the Rocky parcel though is owned by the city, but Commissioner Buttrick expressed concern that it wasn't actually open to public access, and that has been kind of an ongoing question because on Mass Mapper it's marked as having no public access. Mark Stinson's initial thought was that it has no public access because it just doesn't have any frontage. You can only access it from other parcels. And that led me down like a real deep dive. Commissioner Buttrick sent me an email he received in 2012 from Jess Allen saying that she thought there wasn't any public access on this parcel. So it's been a whole journey, and I'm going to give you a quick summary of it. So this is the Rocky parcel right here. This is the notes on the plan, and this references how the land was acquired. So the purpose of this acquisition is for water supply protection pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40, these sections. and is under control of the Board of Public Works. So that's notable here that the Borkowski parcel proper and the root parcel are under the commission's ownership, but this particular parcel is owned by the DPW. And then pursuant, so yeah, aquifer land acquisition. That's why it was purchased. It was purchased with the pursuant to the terms of the deed acquisition notice to the DPW required before any portion of the property is subject to conservation restriction. Just to be clear here, that's like a general, there wasn't a specific conservation restriction placed on this. Like that's what we consider to be a CR as far as I can tell. That's like the conservation restrictions of the aquifer land acquisition program can be transferred to a different ownership or control. Okay, so I did a bunch of digging. One thing I guess I'll reference here is that when Jeff Bagg was working on the grant, he did acquire permission from the director of the DPW, formal permission, that specifically references pursuant to the deeds and restrictions on the DPW property over which this project will occur. The use of passive recreation trails, mountain biking are allowed. This property will include the Rocky parcel. So it's going to reference, like if you actually go to the sections of Mass General Law that were referenced in the deed, on this section, it talks about, so water supply, it talks about or may permit the use of the public for recreational purposes. So this section, as far as I read it, allows the DPW to grant the public access, which that's what Greg did when he wrote that letter.
Yep.
And then lastly, it took me to trying to actually find the grant agreement so it was purchased with the Aquifer Land Acquisition Grant. I was wondering if there was something in that grant agreement that restricted it to public access. And this is the actual Aquifer Land Acquisition Grant terms. And as far as I can tell, it does not restrict public access.
Excellent. It seems like you have solved one kettle of fish.
So I think one kettle of fish is solved here.
Great.
I spoke to every town planner the city has had. I spoke to Stu Beckley, I spoke to Jess Allen, I spoke to Jeff Bagg. So all three of them have weighed in on this.
Great.
It's quite the arc.
Sounds fun.
It was kind of fun. It was kind of fun. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for digging into that.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Great.
You have to
Okay.
like write it in really big letters somewhere. The Rocky
Has public access.
Julie.
Fiasco Trick likes to pull these like vague memories out of his brain and stir up kettles of fish. So
Totally.
thank you
Well,
for
it's
getting to the bottom of that one.
so
I had a question when I was reading that.
yeah.
It says something about the Southampton Conservation Commission within that paper. That one, yeah, as you go through. And I was wondering why Southampton would be involved, unless they meant to put Easthampton.
I think so. There's been property. There was property acquired with this grant in Southampton. Do you know that the commission holds a CR on aquifer land in Southampton?
No, but that's not surprising.
So I think there was like a push in the 90s. The city was given this money for aquifer land, or applied for and received this money for aquifer land protection, and then several different parcels were purchased for it and CR. So I imagine that was. And we share the aquifer with Southampton, obviously.
Yeah, there's a number of towns that share the Burns Aquifer.
I'm sorry, I don't know what page it was on, but it said Southampton Commission, so
I doubt it's anything that we need to dig into either.
Oh yeah, it's right here.
happens Southampton.
I wonder if that was a mistake though
It may have been.
in the 90s. was hard to find this.
I'm sure.
Hard to find these brand terms.
Anything else on Port Chelsea?
No, working on that pre-filing, that's my next step. It's
Okay.
to finish the pre-filing paperwork for natural heritage. I've been struggling a little bit, I think the commission, we still don't really know what scale this project is gonna be. So I'm sort of going back and forth about how to describe it. But I think I'll settle on some vague language, and then I know it'll be kind of an ongoing conversation.
Yeah. Yep, that sounds good. All right, moving on to compliance updates.
I have none. Things are
Amazing. Right. That's great. Everything is moving along.
everything's moving along.
General business meeting minutes from February 10th.
Minutes on the
Have
table.
folks had an opportunity to review those?
Yep.
Any comments or questions before we vote to accept?
We haven't heard anything more, found out anything more about that battery installation near
Westfield.
in Westfield.
I did briefly look into it. I haven't done a deep dive. I mean, that could be something. So
Is this a question about the accuracy of the minutes or something different?
No, just.
Okay, let's handle the minutes acceptance first, and then we can come back to that.
The minutes look great to me. I don't know.
Yeah. I did.
You did. Yes.
yeah,
Can we have a motion to
Motion
accept?
to accept the minutes from February 10th.
Do we have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Your question was,
Just whether or not you had heard anything or found anything out about that.
So we had a public concern about a lithium battery storage system that is proposed to be built in Westfield that is related, that's close to the Barnes Aquifer.
okay,
It's on top of it.
So that was the public concern. I haven't had an opportunity to look super far into it. I'm not sure exactly what the management of the Barnes Aquifer seems like a little bit nebulous. Particularly like the town to town piece of it, but I'd accept direction if the commission has suggestions.
Are we?
we certainly don't have any
Involved in the
jurisdiction of what
Barnes?
happens in Westfield.
Right.
I mean, it's pretty interesting. I actually watched the whole recording of the meeting that had the state about it, but I don't think it's in our jurisdiction.
I think it's definitely not in our jurisdiction.
Like unless there's like a way that
We don't
other
cross
other Concons can like express support for other Concons. I don't know what else we could do.
That makes sense. I got the impression, forgive my newness, that somehow we did have some say over it, and that's why she was bringing it to our attention.
The Pioneer Valley Planning Commission does do some like regional aquifer conversations, so I have not yet been to one, but I know those happen periodically. Next time we have one of those, I'll report back to the commission about what that looks like.
Sounds good. Wetlands ordinance discussion. This is currently, the drafts are being reviewed by the city planner and just the city planner at this point, right?
Yep.
Okay, so we're pending that before that gets circulated for other members' review. Lawrence Road, Ballard Road, Sewer Brook, the DPW issue.
Yeah, okay. So, just a quick, I'll orient you all. Here we are, Lawrence Road peels off of Route 10, and this is Ballard right here, and Florence Road continues towards Northampton. So I received a call from the residents of 35, these ones right here, last week, who were asking me when we're gonna come clear out their swale. And I was like, that's not me. So then I reached out to DPW and I spoke with Clay. And Clay wrote this up for the commission. This was based on after a conversation that I had with him. So this gives a quick summary of what's going on here.
So residents said the word swale. Now I'm seeing brook. What is this actually?
So on Mass Mapper, it's a brook. It's this brook right here. And this associated BVW.
Okay.
Obviously it's a pretty hard time of year to get a real good
Yep.
sense of what it looks like out there. But this is a time of the essence thing, because apparently, so the history that I've come to here is that in 2000, on December 29th, 2000, Jim Gracia applied for permission to dredge the swale and channelize it.
Is there a swale? Thought we just said it was a brook.
I think it's a brook. I think it was called a swale here.
Is the plan actually attached here?
No. I do have the minutes. I found the minutes from this meeting where they discussed it. I also have, he did actually submit an RDA.
Did you go and look in the field at this?
I
Is
have
there a
not looked at it.
possibility that there's both a brook and a swale leading to it?
I think it's possible. The conversation I had with Clay indicated that he was like, no, it's really swampy. We like go in the brook and we channelize the brook.
Oh my God, you can't do that.
Yeah,
We can't do that.
right. But I haven't looked yet. I mean, I'm dubious that I'll be able to tell, but just with the amount of snowpack we have right now, this is kind of the worst time of year,
Right.
but
Well, it definitely does not fall under the bundled NOI because
No.
they're not allowed to be doing in-water work.
right. Well, so, okay, the one other piece of information that's relevant as we start to understand this is that this is the city's GIS. So there's a sewer line
Mm-hmm,
so this is the stream.
mm-hmm.
And the sewer line is right there.
Purple.
The purple is the sewer line.
Okay.
So when I was speaking with Clay about it, he was saying that if they didn't channelize the stream, it would swamp out their access to the sewer line.
That does not give us permission to channelize or alter a waterway.
Right.
I don't quite understand that. I mean, they would be, they're not, they only, are they accessing the entire sewer line or just like the output?
Well, this is a question. I mean, this came up with,
I think what they're doing is it wants to be a big broad wetland. They've dug a trench through the middle of it potentially, or maybe it was a stream and it filled it, whatever it was. They are exacerbating that path to get the water to come into it instead of staying spread out where it's interfering with their access to the sewer, is my understanding.
yes,
But we can't do that.
Right.
Certainly not under a bundled NOI, and I'm not sure that there would be any way to permit that. Period.
Right. So the residents of this neighborhood are used to the city doing this. The city's been doing this since
Mhm.
2000. Here are the minutes from that. We don't actually have the DOA, but it sort of describes it here. It's large enough.
Didn't the neighbors say their backyards are flooding?
Yeah, so their backyards get wet
Because there's a wetland.
because there's a wetland.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I can't do anything about that either.
Mhm.
The sedimentation problem?
I think like the channel grows in and also like
Gets
fills
muddier.
in mud. Yeah, gets muddy.
Mm.
So see, those last couple points are interesting, but due to what problem is that on a wetland? Due to the fact that it rains? Due to the fact to sedimentation?
Right, and here he even says it, right? Are there any wetlands due to this problem that's become a wetland in there?
Yeah.
It used to be mostly filled with a drainage ditch, so I think we have a sense that perhaps the land type has changed, but this was in 2000, and this was going. Slides my favorite.
And line for line, wow.
We also don't know what because they said they gave a negative DOA here, but we don't know what, under what.
Yeah, there's nothing in our, from what you're describing, not having seen it, there's nothing in our bundled order that would allow them to do this. It sounds like we're in a wetland resource area. We would need to wait until certainly the snow melts, but potentially spring to really be able to assess that accurately. And we're gonna have to understand the problem more thoroughly.
In a different season. So there's nothing about, so I was wondering, when I was talking to Clay about this, I was thinking about the White Brook Conservation Area, right? That's next to where we have the SANRAD. And DPW has an easement that runs through there, a sewer easement, and so they mow the vegetation through resource areas. But that is fundamentally that's a different amount of impact to mowing vegetation than modifying the sediment.
Yeah, and we would need to know if any of the exemption applied, we would need to know if they're actually in a resource area proper or in the buffer.
Right.
That's gonna determine whether the exemptions even apply.
Do you know the last time that they did any work?
I think they did this last year. Not sure, but so what it sounds like, what the reason that the neighbor was calling me about this was that she was like, well, they have to do it in winter, because if they don't do it in winter, they won't do it because it gets too swampy for them to go in there.
There's frost requirements. We can only do it during.
I think the frost requirements are the ground being frozen. Yeah.
I guess the thing that's not clear to me, I mean, I guess Julia already said this in terms of understanding the problem better, that it says it facilitates our access to the city sanitary main. Do they actually do anything to the sanitary main, or do they just access the sewer pipe from the outflow down near Route 10? And if so, is the only reason they're doing this to stop the complaints about flooding?
Right. I mean, but this was the same. So this is a question though that I had about White Brook as well, is do they need to access to the pipes in case something goes wrong?
Well,
And that was the
Yes, but you can't do that through a resource area.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that's the intent, but
they can mow a resource area. Like they are at White Brook.
okay, so. Activities conducted to maintain, repair, or replace, but not substantially change or enlarge an existing and lawfully located structure or facility used in the service of the public to provide gas, water, sewer, telephone, telegraph, or other communication services, provided said work utilizes best practical measures to avoid or minimize impacts to wetland resource areas outside the footprint of said structure or facility. Project proponent claiming that work to remove, filter, or alter an area does not require the filing of notice of intent has the burden of establishing that the work is not subject to regulation.
And that's fully exempt, right?
It is.
Resource area or buffer zone.
So I think we need to understand better how this is related to maintaining the sewer, if it is.
yeah.
To know if it could be exempted. So we'll need more information. But if it is simply a matter of nuisance flooding
Right.
because homes are built too close to a wetland, that
That's,
does not count under an exemption.
yep. For sure.
No, there's sewage mixed in.
Right. Okay, so I'll reach back out to Clay. I mean, I did feel like in that conversation I had with him, I sort of tried to get at this of like, how required is this? And he was like, what I recall him saying was like, well, if there was a leak in the summer, if a pipe broke in the summertime, and this, we wouldn't be able to get to the pipe.
I think my understanding is that the regulation would exempt activities to get to that pipe and repair it
At that moment.
at that moment. I don't
Right.
think it allows for draining or altering the wetland resource area to make sure that you can always get to the pipe
Right.
for maintenance needs. So that would be something we might need to clarify a bit with Mark Stinson, but that's not my understanding of how that works.
Okay.
We have other utility lines that run under and through resource areas, and that doesn't mean that you can just obliterate the resource area in that
Right.
corridor.
Right. This was the question I had about Whitebrook though, about mowing, because they,
Yeah. I don't know.
yeah. I could reach out to Mark though about that as well.
Yeah, I would say get some better understanding of the purpose first, and then give Mark a call and
Okay.
see what he has to say.
Great.
All right, last item, ordinance subcommittee affordable housing recommendation.
Yeah, so this was something that Commissioner Buttrick flagged to be on the commission's radar. And I'm not sure, it may be something we just want to talk about in another moment when he's here. But there was the Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership, which is a city committee, wrote recommendations for how to change the zoning ordinance. And Commissioner Buttrick's thought that he communicated to me was just that this will have an impact as to the commission as the stormwater regulators, as the primary stormwater regulators in the town, and that it could also potentially have an impact to buildings over the aquifer. So it's linked in the ongoing projects updates. It could be a good idea to take a look through. It's important to note though that this is a recommendations report from this committee. It's currently on the desk of the ordinance. The city council sent it to their ordinance subcommittee. So the ordinance subcommittee is reviewing it right now. I think there already has been quite a bit of conversation about it. So I think there's a good chance that like this recommendations report is not going to be accepted necessarily as is. But Commissioner Buttrick flagged this, I think, as a question as to whether or not someone from the commission, I'm sure if he was volunteering himself, but wanted to be like more actively involved and like have more of an ear to this. I will say I asked around in my department, and this isn't even quite my department yet. Like because the Affordable Fair Housing Partnership is separate. They've issued this recommendations report. It will be reviewed by planning board after the ordinance subcommittee, or the ordinance subcommittee will send it to planning board, I think, and then it will become more of a planning project.
It seemed like it was pretty early days still.
Yes,
That's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. And it could be a good idea if the commissioners wanted to read it too.
Did you read it?
I've given it a read through.
Did you see any ordinances that they're talking about changing that would directly change how we're doing things?
I mean, it would, the big picture of what this zoning ordinance does is it makes it so that you can build more in smaller spaces.
Denser housing.
Yeah.
Say that again.
Denser housing.
Denser housing, yeah.
Which would certainly impact stormwater.
Which impacts stormwater.
Yep.
That's kind of the big piece of it. It mentions the Aquifer Protection District. It doesn't change the Aquifer Protection District, which is like a zoning overlay that we have. but it does allow for denser housing within that per the changes to other parts of the zoning.
All right. Keep an eye on. Any other general business? A motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It is 7:32. We are concluding this evening's meeting of the Easthampton Conservation Commission. Our next meeting will be March 10th at 6 p.m.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.